Wow, I'm just excited to actually be making this video because this is something, and I hope I'm not the only one who can like relate to this. This is something I've wanted to do for a couple months now, and I've talked about it a ton and have had just like taken no action towards it. And so right now, like at this moment, you're experiencing like me actually deciding to do something about something I was saying. And so welcome. If you're here, you're probably a friend of mine or a family member. If for whatever reason you were on the internet and decided like I'm going to check this guy's video out and we don't know each other, welcome to you as well. I'm excited you're here. But kind of, I guess, a summary of what this video is and some of the other videos I'm hoping to put out is that I have been working on a project. I've been working on a doctoral project, like very recently I've started, and every once in a while I will come across an idea or a phrase or a quote or a discovery within my research. And I think if this was general knowledge, or if this was a conversation I was having with these different people I love, like someone specific might come to mind, or like an actual group of people might come to mind, we could have an amazing conversation on this. And like sometimes I'll just like message it to someone. So like my friend Ashley, who I'm gonna talk about later on in this video, she's awesome. Like she'll just let me message her an idea and we can like talk about it. But like sometimes like it's like, man, I don't know how to just like put it out to the masses. Like I don't know how to just to give it to this people group. So I had this idea of if I can make some videos that they're not my entire project. Like it's not even like, it doesn't even have to be super well researched. It's just like, if I have an idea and something that I'm excited about, even if it's not super well thought out, I thought, man, like what if I just released a video once a week on some of those things and put them out to my friends and family, and then like we could have something to talk about. Like it would be like, it would keep a conversation alive, because really that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. So if you don't know, my doctoral project is on the relationship between cognitive science and neurodiversity and theology/mysticism. So over the last few years, I've kind of, towards the end of my like master's degree, I gravitated towards just this love for kind of that new fringe cognitive science movement, where you saw a lot of different people studying cognitive science or neuroscience, but they had it next to a different science or a different academic practice. And so one that comes to mind for me is there's a professor at Yale named L.A. Paul, who specializes in what's called the transformative experience. Like she wrote a book called Transformative Experience. She teaches the classes on this. And in many ways, her book and idea of transformative experience is what brought Brooke and I to where we're at right now. So kind of a life update for us is 2020 was a really complex year for us. Similar to many of you, we experienced honestly, we just experienced a lot of trauma this year, and a lot of stuff that had happened maybe like within our childhoods or within our adult life, like a lot of hardships we'd had. Those pains and those wounds were just like brought to the front of our lives because we were locked in a house for months. And as we went through this really complex year and we saw some of our relationships break and we saw some abuses taking place, and honestly like experienced some abuse ourselves within some communities that we were a part of, we really started to examine what was most important to us in life. And we felt a strong pull to move our family to Minnesota. So if you've been following us on social media, like you might have seen some vague like mention of that, but like we decided to move to Minnesota, and there were a lot of pros and cons there between going and staying. Like staying, our son has spent his entire life where we were at. Going, our son's cousins are here. And so even if it's at social distance, like he still has some access to other children in the middle of just this weird time, this weird virtual world we're living in. We were down here and we we saw some of the conversations and actions taking place in Minnesota around around different justice movements, around conversations, around reforms, and we wanted to be a part of that conversation. Like, we wanted to be able to witness that conversation firsthand. So it'd be a positive, but then on the negative side of things, like, we had some friends we loved and some conversations taking place in our previous location that we were excited about. But really what it came down to was kind of L.A. Paul, one of her big arguments within transformative experiences, you have to decide, do I want to see who I'll become if I take this action? Like, do I want to see who I'll become if I jump into this transformative experience? And for us, it came down to that. We wanted to see who our family would become if we moved to Minneapolis. So we're here, and it is uncomfortable. It's new. We're looking for jobs, and we're trying to restart our lives in the middle of a global pandemic, and it is something else. But the thing that I want to talk about today, as I kind of dive a little bit more into what's going on in my doctoral project, is, so my project has been around cognitive science, neurodiversity, and theology/mysticism. I kind of put those in the same category. There's some differences, but we won't get as we'll leave it a little bit more vague today. When you look at cognitive science and theology, one of the things I'm looking a lot at recently as I'm beginning this project is creation narratives. So if you're studying like the evolution of the human mind and how we process and how we develop our thoughts and our feelings and behaviors, how psychometrics come to be, like how do our different personalities form, like, you know, what, like, as I'm looking at these things, like, I'm diving back into human history, and I'm looking a lot, especially the last few weeks, at creation narratives and myths. And the thing that I'm finding is that many of these creation narratives, like, are remarkably similar. And another thing I'm finding is that many of them were written in these liminal spaces. And what I mean by that is there's a concept called liminality. It's an anthropological concept of when someone from either like a tribe or a culture that practices transformation or practices rites of passage. When you're going through this rite of passage, there's this space in that where you've left what you were, but you have not become what you will be yet. You're in the middle of this rite of passage, and that's what the liminal space is. So you've left what you were. So you might have been a child or a son or an apprentice or whatever that thing was that you were. And eventually you're going to be something greater than that. But in order to do that, you have to live in this space where you're neither. You're almost less than both sides. And for Brooke and I, like, we're living in a liminal space. Like, we gave up friendships, we gave up influence in different communities, we gave up titles, we gave up careers to come up to Minnesota and to be in this space where, like, we're not what we're gonna be yet. Like, we don't have a community up here yet. There's not people. I'm just, you know, like, I don't really have any friends in this area. I'm not doing a ton of work. Like, most of my work is online, and that's kind of you know, what I do for a job is kind of flooded. Like, there's not a lot of consulting going on online right now. So we're in this liminal space, and that's great, because as I'm studying creation narratives, a lot of these creation narratives were written in those liminal spaces. And the reason for that is that people, these groups, these cultures, these tribes were trying to figure out who they were, who they would become by looking at who they had been. So they would be in this space where they're trying to figure out who they will become in the future. What will our group's purpose? Because when a lot of these were written, there wasn't really individual thought as much as group thought. Like, the individual was not as important as the society or the tribe or the family or the culture. That's where we found our identity, was in the group. And so as a group, they're in this liminal space, and they're trying to figure out, who will we be? What will our contribution be to the world? And they're trying to figure that out by going back and asking the question, who were we? Where did we come from? What is our origin? And so in some of these divine in some of these creation myths, one of the more popular ones I'll look at and kind of start with, and it lines up with like a lot of people's traditions within our society today, would be the Genesis myth. So like the Judeo-Christian myth of creation. In Genesis, you see it's this God, and kind of at the beginning, he's more of like a warrior God. Like he's very tribalistic focused, very like kind of archaic is how we're seeing we're seeing her, and this God creates everything through speech. It talks things into existence, except humans. And that's what's interesting. Is this God speaks, and when this God speaks, everything's created. But when they get to humans, when this God gets to humans, it creates humans out of elements and breath. And then it's real interesting because it does make a speech about these humans, but it doesn't necessarily create these humans out of that speech. It says, "Let us make humankind in our image," and then it creates this human out of the elements, out of the dust, out of the dirt, and then it breathes its breath into that human. And that's going to be something we're going to see in all of these creation myths, is this divine origin and identity, the identity of humans coming out of the gods, coming out of something divine. You see it in Egyptian Memphite theology. So you have the god of craftsmen, which is Ptah, has a thought of what creation could be. So this craftsman god, who's like more of like works with metals and wood, and is just a real crafty character in the story, has a thought of, this is what creation could be, this is what animals could be, this is what the land could be, this is what the elements could be, this is what the sun could be, and it speaks that thought into existence. And again, we see this divine origin of where we come from. You'll see this, like, as you study like all these creation myths, like in the Enuma Elish, which is like Babylonian creation myth, you're going to see it. And in the Sumerian creation myth, the Barton Cylinder, you're going to see this. And even, this is where it gets real fun, even with more skeptical thinkers. And I have a bunch of friends, and in this camp, in this world, just through kind of where I am and what I do, and within academia, who fall more in line with this skeptical view of origin story. Even they're going to say there's something different about the human. And so Richard Dawkins calls it the selfish gene, which is one of my favorite concepts when we talk about creation, the selfish gene. And that talks about, like, there is a intrinsic need to survive. And the way that selfish gene is described is very similar to how these ancient wisdom literatures describe the human's divine origin. And so I'm left as I'm researching these creation myths, I'm seeing that these creation myths speak to the divine origin or identity. Sorry, you're gonna notice a little bit of a pause and a glitch there. My camera, someone called me and it cut out, so that happens. But yeah, as I'm looking through these creation narratives, I'm noticing there's something different about humans. So there's they point to our ancient wisdom literatures point to more of a divine origin or identity, and then also they point to humans having an ascendancy and an influence over creation. So at some point, there's always a call to creation, to be a part of that creating process where humans are going to interact with and even change and finish creation. Especially if you see some of these more like South American kind of earth diver creation myths. You see these points in stories where the humans kind of come up out of it, and they see a process that's begun, and now it's sort of their charge to continue that process. or you'll see specifically within like you'll see stories where the human is more of a concept that's going to like self-fulfill itself. So it starts as the dust, and now it's going to decide the path it's going to take, and through that path, that's who it's going to become. So there's this ascendancy and influence over creation. One of my favorite examples of someone living out their idea of origin stories and how they live their life today, I'd say is my friend Ashley that I referenced earlier. So Ashley works within molecular biology. I think last time we kind of talked about like theological or mysticism belief, there was a curiosity there with more of like a secular humanism bend. And Ashley was a part of one of these conversations I had a while back, and this conversation was kind of around these ideas, but it was more like the names of the theories of these. So like what category would each of these myths go into? And Ashley gravitated more to like creation out of chaos. And this speaks a lot to Ashley, because her story, and I asked her like before I shared any of this, she has had a unique approach to some of her biggest accomplishments. So she's someone that has struggled with social anxiety, and two of her biggest fears in her life have been a fear of being touched or grabbed or held onto, and a fear of public speaking. And I just love this story so much. So Ashley, in college, with this fear of speech, decided that she was going to join the debate team to try to overcome this fear of speech. So she was gonna make an effort to overcome this fear, kind of like an immersion therapy, I guess. And by the end of it, she was so good at it that I believe she like held like president of the debate club. Like she got so good at debating. And I'm going to be honest, like Ashley's one of my favorite people. She's one of the more interesting people that I know. And one of the reasons is because of her ability to hold these really unique conversations. And I've seen her around people that have very different views from her, and her approach those views with such grace and humility and understanding. And I think that desire to learn to be comfortable within speech has done well for Ashley, and especially like I see the tie in there with creation from chaos. The second example I would give for that would be my friend Ashley has. She, again, I'd mentioned earlier, she was afraid of touch. She was afraid to be grabbed onto. So she decided to sign up for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And if you know anything about that, it's a sport that involves a lot of being touched, a lot of being grabbed, a lot of being held down. And Ashley wanted to immerse herself in this practice. And today, Ashley is a very accomplished martial artist, has done what's called super fights, like within a cage, has done several competitions, holds medals, all because she immersed herself in this program. And so after one of these conversations Ashley and I had about these kind of creation narratives, these origin stories, she sent me a lengthy, like an essay she had written called Creation from Chaos. And I want to read the conclusion of that essay. She said, even if we, or wait, nope, that's the wrong part. Ashley said, there is a profound poetry to be found amongst the turmoil in which we exist, as long as we recognize that chaos is not the end, it is the beginning. And Ashley's life has held to this conviction that she speaks about in this essay. Her life has held, has really spoken to this creation from chaos narrative. So as I'm studying creation narrative and studying alongside things such as like spiral dynamics, integral theory, like ways of seeing the process and evolution of the human mind, I'm left with two conclusions. and things that are going to challenge me, and that I would love to see my friends and family challenged with this as well, is I'm going to look for what my contribution will be to creation. I'm going to assume that I have a unique thought, feelings, and behaviors. I have a unique personality and identity. I have a unique cognitive capacity. And out of that unique identity, I'm going to look for how I'm going to contribute to the world. The second conclusion I'm left with from this interesting, just like piece of this research, is that I will listen to others' ideas of creation, knowing that they have something to teach me. It's easy, especially for those of us who may have like experienced some trauma within communities where creation's held highly, and some of these myths are held highly. It's easy for us to approach it with judgment and fear and refrain. And if that's where you're at, that's totally fine. And you don't need to apologize for that. But if you're able to listen to those around you that you might scoff at their views of creation, we might learn something there, because I truly believe that diversity of belief and thought has something to teach me. So those are my conclusions for this week. Those are my challenges to myself. If you want to take up those same challenges, great. If not, I'm just so happy you watched this video. If you have any questions, you know how to contact me. You can get me on Instagram, or if you have my number, feel free to call me. I'd love to discuss this more. Anyways, you all have a great week, and I will see you next week.